The war between Ukraine and Russia, 2014-2025. The conflict between Ukraine and Russia, spanning over a decade, has reshaped geopolitics, tested human resilience, and demonstrated the courage of a nation determined to defend its sovereignty. This historical overview covers the period from the initial unrest in 2014 to the ongoing developments in 2025, highlighting military, political, and humanitarian aspects of the war. The beginning, 2014, Euromaidan and Crimea. The roots of the conflict trace back to 2013-2014, during the Euromaidan protests in Ukraine. Citizens demanded closer integration with the European Union and an end to government corruption. The protests culminated in February 2014 with the ousting of President Viktor Yanukovych. In response, Russia viewed the change in power as a threat to its interests in the region. In March 2014, Russian forces annexed Crimea after a controversial referendum widely criticized by the international community as illegitimate. The annexation marked the first major territorial breach in post-Cold War Europe and triggered widespread condemnation from the West. The event also set the stage for armed conflict in eastern Ukraine, as separatist movements emerged in the Donetsk and Luhansk regions. War in Donbas, 2014-2015. Following Crimea's annexation, pro-Russian separatists in Donetsk and Luhansk declared independence, sparking a war in the Donbas region. Ukrainian forces mobilized to defend the territories, while Russia provided covert support to the separatists, including weapons, training, and personnel. Battles in cities such as Slavyansk, Debaltseve, and Ilovaisk resulted in thousands of casualties, displacement of civilians, and destruction of infrastructure. The Minsk Protocol, signed in September 2014, and the Minsk II Agreement in February 2015, aimed to establish a ceasefire and lay out steps for a political resolution. While these agreements temporarily reduced fighting, violations were frequent and the conflict remained unresolved. The war created a stalemate that lasted for several years, with sporadic skirmishes and ongoing political tension. Military modernization and international support, 2015-2019. During the stagnant period of 2015-2019, Ukraine focused on modernizing its military and strengthening national defense. With support from NATO countries and Western allies, Ukraine invested in advanced weaponry, improved training for its armed forces, and enhanced intelligence and cyber capabilities. The Ukrainian government also worked to reform governance and anti-corruption measures, attempting to stabilize the country amidst ongoing hostilities. Russia, on the other hand, maintained its military presence near the Ukrainian border, engaged in hybrid warfare tactics, and continued to support separatist enclaves. The West imposed sanctions on Russia, targeting key economic sectors and political figures while diplomatic negotiations remained tense. Although the situation appeared frozen at times, the potential for escalation persisted, leaving both nations on edge. Escalation and invasion, 2022. In February 2022, Russia launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine, dramatically escalating the conflict. Russian forces attacked multiple regions including Kyiv, Kharkiv, and southern ports, aiming to seize major cities and force a political surrender. The invasion was widely condemned internationally, prompting massive sanctions, diplomatic isolation for Russia, and global solidarity with Ukraine. Ukrainian resistance was fierce. Despite facing a larger and more heavily armed adversary, Ukraine's military volunteers and civilians mounted a coordinated defense. Cities such as Kyiv, Kharkiv, and Mariupol became symbols of resilience, with civilians and soldiers demonstrating extraordinary courage under bombardment. The war brought devastating humanitarian consequences, including thousands of deaths, millions of refugees, and widespread infrastructure destruction. Global response and aid. The international community responded with unprecedented support for Ukraine. Western countries supplied advanced weaponry, intelligence sharing, financial aid, and humanitarian assistance. Economic sanctions aimed at Russia sought to weaken its military capabilities and pressure a political resolution. Humanitarian organizations provided aid to displaced populations, addressing food, shelter, and medical needs for millions of affected civilians. Additionally, diplomatic efforts focused on negotiating ceasefires and peace talks, though initial attempts largely failed. The conflict continued to draw global attention, highlighting the importance of sovereignty, international law, and the balance of power in Europe. Resistance and counteroffensives, 2022-2023. During 2022 and 2023, Ukraine launched strategic counteroffensives to reclaim occupied territories. Ukrainian forces successfully liberated key cities in the Kharkiv, Kherson, and Zaporizhzhia regions, demonstrating tactical ingenuity and high morale. Urban warfare, guerrilla tactics, and drone operations became critical components of Ukraine's defense strategy. The war also showcased the role of technology. Drones, satellite imagery, cyber warfare, and advanced artillery systems became crucial in intelligence gathering and precision strikes. Both sides adapted rapidly, resulting in a constantly shifting battlefield landscape. Humanitarian crisis and refugees. The ongoing war created one of the largest humanitarian crises in recent history. Millions of Ukrainians fled to neighboring countries, primarily Poland, Romania, and Hungary, seeking safety from bombardments and occupation. Refugee camps, international aid programs, and NGO initiatives became lifelines for those displaced. Within Ukraine, hospitals struggled to treat the wounded amidst limited resources, and civilian casualties were tragically high. Schools, cultural institutions, and critical infrastructure suffered repeated damage, exacerbating the challenges of daily life. Despite the hardships, communities displayed resilience, organizing grassroots efforts to provide food, shelter, and psychological support. Economic and political consequences. The war severely impacted both Ukraine and Russia economically. Ukraine faced destruction of industries, ports, and agricultural regions, yet international financial aid helped stabilize certain sectors. Russia endured sanctions affecting banking, energy, and trade, contributing to inflation and economic uncertainty. Politically, the conflict reinforced Ukraine's national identity and unity. It strengthened alliances with Western nations and accelerated reforms aimed at integration with the European Union and NATO. Russia, in contrast, faced increasing isolation and internal discontent, although its leadership maintained a narrative of strategic objectives and military goals. 2024-2025, continued conflict and reconstruction efforts. By 2024 and 2025, the conflict entered a prolonged phase characterized by localized battles, attritional warfare, and diplomatic deadlocks. Ukraine continued to reclaim territories and strengthen defenses, while Russia adjusted strategies to maintain influence in contested regions. Simultaneously, reconstruction efforts began in liberated areas, focusing on rebuilding infrastructure, restoring public services, and addressing the needs of civilians. International organizations and governments played critical roles in funding and coordinating rebuilding projects. The war has left deep scars on society, politics, and the economy. Generations of Ukrainians grew up amid conflict, witnessing both the horrors of war and the heroism of their nation. The resilience displayed by civilians, soldiers, and leaders became a defining feature of modern Ukraine. Cultural and symbolic significance. The war's cultural impact is profound. Ukraine's struggle has inspired literature, art, music, and media globally. Monuments, murals, and digital campaigns commemorate bravery and sacrifice. Symbols such as the blue and yellow flag, the trident, and phrases like Slava Ukraini became rallying points for national and international solidarity. Stories of individual heroism, humanitarian aid, and global support illustrate the human dimension of the conflict, reminding the world of both the cost of war and the strength of community. Conclusion. From the annexation of Crimea in 2014 to the ongoing battles in 2025, the war between Ukraine and Russia represents one of the most significant conflicts of the 21st century. It is a story of territorial ambition, national sovereignty, global geopolitics, and human endurance. Ukraine's determination to defend its land, culture, and people underscores the universal desire for freedom and self-determination. While the conflict continues, lessons from the past decade emphasize the importance of international solidarity, technological innovation in modern warfare, and the resilience of ordinary citizens in extraordinary circumstances. The war's legacy will be studied for generations, not only for its military and political dimensions, but also for its demonstration of courage, unity, and the human spirit in the face of adversity.